Hi, my name is Mike Wink. I'm a Operations Section Chief with CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 1, and we've been here on the Dixie fire for 2 rotations now with Team 3 as well. And during that time, we've learned a lot of things about fire behavior, extreme fire growth, extreme fire behavior that can happen on the 395 corridor coming off the Diamond Mountain Range, or what's called the escarpment, from Susanville all the way down to Doyle and continuing on down to Hallelujah Junction. So you'll be hearing in this segment from a lot of local leadership, incident meteorologists, our fire behavior analysts, and the locals of occurrences along the Highway 395 from the Eagle Fire in 1989 to current and some of the other ones, and what to expect if you're in a fire on the Highway 395 corridor. So please pay attention, and we hope you enjoy this segment, the Recall and Fire on the 395.
Hello, my name is Joe Walton. I'm the Training Battalion Chief for Lassa Modoc Unit. We're going to be seeing some overview on some of the fire history throughout these incidents we've had on the escarpment. Multiple fires, multiple leadership throughout the unit that have been committed on the fires throughout this summer and previous summers and previous fire history. There's a lot of good intel that you guys are going to be receiving coming up throughout this segment. One thing, obviously, where we work in Lassa Modoc, dealing with the southwest winds, dealing with the escarpment, dealing with trying to construct handline on the escarpment. Anybody that knows the escarpment area knows it's rocky, it's steep, high elevation, whether you're construction dozer line or hand lines or trying to pump hose lays. Get to know your fire history, get to know the spots where we've constructed lines throughout this incident and the history of our unit. Talk to the people, talk to us, ask questions, because a lot of stuff you're gonna gather is from our upper management throughout the history of our unit and these fires. Thank you, I hope you enjoy and hope you learn something. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Don Watt, the Fire Behavior Analyst for CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 1. Today we're here to talk about fire on the 395 corridor and the different effects the weather has on fire behavior. So there's a good history of interesting fire behavior here on 395 corridor. So on this map, we have the Eagle Fire from 1999, we have portions of the Dixie Fire, and we have the Beckworth Fire, some of the more prominent fires that we've had out there. And we're going to talk about the terrain and the weather and how it affects that fire behavior. So here's just a quick shot of basically what's called the escarpment coming down to Honey Lake on the bottom side. That red line is the fire perimeter that they have from the Dixie Fire. But you can see it's basically a sharp ridge. It drops down the slope into a flats out into Honey Lake. So here's another aerial view looking north up the canyon. This is from the Eagle Fire. You basically have this escarpment, pretty good drop off directly into a flats near Eagle Lake. Honey Lake. So this is basically a graphic they pulled out of the investigation from the Eagle Fire, and it's just a quick idea to show you why this wind effect happens. Basically, you have higher level winds that are out of the southwest to west, and then you have Honey Lake, which is a flat lake, which is very shallow and also dries up quite a bit in most summers. So in 1989, the lake bed was dry. This year, again in 2021, the lake bed is dry. So as you get heating over the valley, when the sun hits it, heats out throughout the afternoon, it starts creating a thermal low. Basically, that air wants to lift. When that wants to lift up, it has to be replaced by cooler or another air mass. So what will happen is that upper level air will come down. It will be up at the higher elevations. It will be slightly cooler, and when it heats up enough and you get enough lift over Honey Lake, it wants to drop down the escarpment on that ridge face and come down those slopes. And when you look at that area, there's a lot of canyons, broad faces, so it wants to push down. Just like any other foehn wind, as it's coming downhill at increased speed. At the same time, you have different terrain features that will create shearing, eddy effects, so you'll have fire whirls or dust devils that create at the same time. So that creates a very dynamic fire situation. As it's coming down the slope, you'll start seeing that swirling. You'll start seeing an unstable atmosphere, it wanting to lift, and it creates very rapid fire movement and very erratic fire movement. You're not quite sure exactly where that's going to cross, but it will want to push across Highway 395 and get across to the flats, and then that's where it'll eventually start to spread out and reduce in its speeds. So One idea of the fuels that are out there, it kind of has a timber model up on top. It comes down to some more brush, and then it gets into grass. The one interesting issue is when some of those canyons, you do have some heavier timber that comes all the way down towards the bottom. Where you're really going to see that increased wind speeds is in that open stands and the brush and the grass. That's where it'll really increase the speeds the most. The timber will kind of keep it a little bit more subdued, but at the same time, you're getting more ember production, more potential for spots, creating more erratic fire behavior. So this is just a quick picture of from the Eagle Fire, some fire rolls that were coming down. You have anywhere from 4-foot brush, 2-foot brush to grass, and it will move right through there at a rapid pace to an extreme rate of spread. So the big picture here on that area is as you have sun with no shading over Honey Lake, it'll heat up during the day. As that heats up, it wants to replace. So usually late in the afternoon, early evening, you'll start seeing those winds pick up. And they'll become the dominant wind that pushes down into the valley, and that'll cause that erratic fire spread and fire behavior. You'll also hear some stories from some people that were out on the Dixie fire that came up. We had shading over that lake bed, so it delayed that response. So they didn't see it till later in the evening, where you start having that down slope, down canyon winds, which overpowered with a little bit of that same thermal low, and that's where it saw later. So it's a varying time depending on what kind of weather conditions you have over Honey Lake.
Good morning. Derek Williams, incident meteorologist on the Dixie Fire West Zone. I want to talk about the typical weather setup that occurs along the US 395 corridor and the escarpment area on the Diamond Range here. The typical setup, especially in the summertime, we have those southwest winds each day, and we've seen this over the summertime. You have those southwest winds. The Honey Lake area heats up, and what that does is that creates what we call a heat low, or an area of localized low pressure in the lower elevation areas. And that low pressure tends to drag the air off of the plateau, accelerate it down the escarpment onto the 395 corridor. Okay, so when that happens, if there's active fire along that escarpment, it can contribute to extreme fire behavior. We've seen that this summer and even in the past. It has a rich fire history, and that weather setup facilitates that extreme fire behavior that we've seen. So one thing for the setup that has to occur is clear air. When you get clearer, you get more heating, and the hotter this gets, essentially, basically in the middle 90s, you can have that setup. And another setup is you have an existing southwest winds. If you have that existing west and southwest winds, that tends to accelerate those winds as well. So whenever you have those two combined, you can get that type of flow over the escarpment. Now, what has helped us in the last few days at least is smoke. So that smoke provides a shading effect to the sunlight, and that area isn't able to heat up as much. So we haven't seen that acceleration of wind over the escarpment in the last few days, but that doesn't mean it can't happen, especially in the late afternoon and early evening time frames. So, yeah, very rich fire history here, and expect the unexpected as far as those winds developing in the late afternoon and evening hours. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Scott Packwood, Lassen MODOC Unit Chief for CAL FIRE. I'll talk about all the fires that I've been involved in throughout my career since the last 30 years along the escarpment Highway 395 area. We'll just go back to 1987, and the Clark Fire burned in this area. 1989, the Eagle Fire. Most recently, in 2020, we had the Laura 2 fire just down here in Doyle in November. Earlier this year, the Beckworth complex came off the escarpment into Doyle and Costanza area, as well as the Dixie fire this year. I was assigned to the Eagle Fire in 1989, which started just up above the highway, burned upslope in the afternoon, caught the downslope winds, and made a run back down along Highway 395 for multiple days. On the Dixie Fire, when it spotted across, as was mentioned earlier, it came over the hill, burned downslope, and consumed the entire area of the Eagle Fire within just a couple hours. I responded from the ICP down to the rest area along 395, helping to assist direct engines and resources in. It came off the hill above Jeter, Hicks, and down into Ponderosa Way area. I observed a large firewall establish and just become stationary just south of Ponderosa and Hicks that lasted for approximately 20 to 30 minutes and was probably a quarter mile, eighth of a mile wide at the base until it consumed the fuel in there. And it just sat there and rotated. Very intense fire behavior just south of Ponderosa there. So as was mentioned, those winds, once they become established and pick up a lot of heat from the fire and the fuels, will remain erratic, and many firewalls being established. I've observed firewalls coming off 90 degrees to the slope, so shooting out at a 45 off the escarpment. During the Laura 2, we had very erratic winds late in the fall in November. Picked up a little debris burn and blew it across Highway 395, destroying multiple structures in Doyle. Similar fire weather conditions during the Beckworth, came down, burned through Doyle, destroying multiple structures. One thing to watch out for when responding to any of these fires in this area is the high winds and flying debris. Be conscientious of where you locate your apparatus. Be conscientious when you open doors on vehicles. The winds can grab them and rip them right out of your hand. We've had multiple vehicles damaged due to the high winds, overextending the doors, completely breaking and bending the hinges, ripping compartment doors open, limbs, sand, debris flying in, damaging windshields, headlights, body damage to multiple apparatus. So it's always somewhat predictable, but at the same time can be rapidly changing in that area when those winds pick up or surface. So be very conscious, be heads up, be aware of your vehicle location, which way that wind's blowing before you open the doors. Park into the wind as much as possible. Usually that's going to be facing the escarpment. That bitter brush and the vegetation in that area will produce flame lengths of 50 to 100 feet, easily blowing across the highway, the width of the highway. Multiple spotting occurs during that event, and fires rapidly grow. During the 89 Eagle Fire, firefighters were overrun along 395, just about the current rest area location. Once they recognized that they were being overrun, tried to grab their shelters, it ripped them right out of their hands, ripped their helmets off, and it's very difficult to maintain control of your situation in that erratic wind. So very dangerous area to fight fire, all the way from Susanville, extending down to approximately Highway 70 into Loyalton area. Thank you.
Eric Ewing, Lassen Modoc Unit Assistant Chief for Lassen Modoc. I wanted to reiterate a lot of what you've heard about the multiple fires over the years on the east side. You've heard a lot about the variation of fire behavior from the Susanville side all the way down to the Loyalton or Howley Junction area. Most of those fires have been a summertime occurrence with the thermal low over Honey Lake pulling downslope winds from the mountains into the desert. However, that pattern also continues in the wintertime months with a southwest frontal passage. The Laura 2 fire was one of those where it was a late summer, early fall fire that was a southwest wind that burnt real fast and furious, which was about 30 acres, and it burned multiple homes. But that was due to a southwest frontal passage. That fire was about 3 hours long, and it was done. It rained directly after that, and it was a simple interaction. With that, one thing on those southwest winds and how that fire operates is if the fire is up on the escarpment and is established on the escarpment, it will tend to spot over the top of the escarpment, get established mid-slope, and then that push down slope to the bottom of the valley bottom. So with that, I just wanted to reiterate that that weather pattern will establish itself not only in the summertime, but also in the winter months. During the Beckworth fire, there was multiple days where there was a significant fire front progressing towards the escarpment, moving into the Honey Lake Valley. The first day where there was a significant pyrocumulus established over the incident, on the valley bottom, there was virtually no wind whatsoever. The wind was dead calm in the valley bottom. The area was shadowed out with the smoke layer, and the natural daily occurring winds never materialized. One thing to note during that time frame that there was thunder and lightning noticed over the valley, over the town of Doyle, but again, those winds never did surface. On the second day, the same situation presented itself where a large fire front was progressing towards the escarpment. Lightning and thunder was noticed again, same about mid-afternoon, and then within about 5 minutes of that thunder and lightning was raindrops noticed in the town of Doyle. 15 minutes later is when that fire front progressed towards the town of Doyle down across Highway 395.
Hey, good morning. My name is Sean Rayleigh, Battalion Chief, CAL FIRE Lassen Modoc Unit, Beaver Battalion. I've been assigned to the Dixie Fire for several weeks, and on the operational period of Sunday, the 5th of September, I was assigned to the Westwood sector, which is this area here. Underneath the Westwood sector, there were several branches and multiple groups. In the afternoon of September 5th, down here in the Doyle area, in the Janesville branch, we had a significant amount of fire that was up on the hillside, approximately a mile from 395. The fire was mostly moving laterally to the east and was with small flame lengths and really wasn't doing much. It was in an area where we couldn't access with dozers, and we didn't have enough hand crews to go up there direct. During the entire Dixie incident, this whole 395 corridor, it was spoke about multiple times about the fire history in the area. Several times in the recent years, the Sheep Fire, the Beckworth Complex, the Spot Fire in Janesville, and the Eagle Fire in 1989, there's a history of fire running downhill towards 395. So we were all very aware of that fire behavior potential in that area. That afternoon, in the days prior, we really weren't seeing that weather pattern that sets up for that fire behavior to take place, but we were all very aware that it could happen. About 8 o'clock that evening, we had all our resources in place, and the fire again was moving laterally across the east to the east, and about 8 o'clock or so, the fire really quickly kind of shifted. The smoke began to stand straight up, and within probably 2 or 3 minutes, the wind began to blow downhill towards us at 395. And it was almost as if the wind coming off the escarpment was very much like if water was pouring down the escarpment. So the wind brought the fire down towards 395 very quickly. It was about a mile away, and within several minutes, the fire was right at 395. We did have a dozer line that was 10 blades wide that we were hoping would possibly hold some of the fire, and that was down in the flats, and the fire subsequently came right across that dozer line. And it was where the fire came down, there was terrain features, and it was a canyon, and that fire came right down the canyon just like water pouring out of a canyon. So there was a section of fire that came directly straight down towards 395, and as it got into the flats, much like water, the wind sort of eddied out to the northwest and to the southeast. So we ended up having a direct impact straight to 395, but we also had fire spreading laterally both directions, running head fire to the northwest and to the southeast. So it was a very complicated and complex operation that we had, and it was critical that we held 395 because recent fire history in 2017 in the same general area, fire started and moved for 85,000 acres in that area across 395. So our priorities were to hold 395, all our resources came back to the highway and began to prep for holding 395. We did have some spots across 395, and we were able to pick those up. The one thing that really helped us was when the wind came down through the canyon and the fire came through the canyon, we did have some kind of battling winds. So as the fire moved to the northeast, to the southeast and to the northwest, those winds were battling. So we were able to just kind of anchor off the highway and start grabbing a toehold on the flanks. And as the wind on each flank shifted, we were able to go in and go direct. And then as the wind shifted back the other direction, we were able to start going direct on the other side, and we were able to pick up the flanks.
Hey, good morning. Isaac Thornton, Battalion Chief, Last and Modoc Unit. Started my career here in 1998. Fairly familiar with some of the fire behavior that happens along the 395 escarpment. In the last 2 years, I've been fortunate or unfortunate enough to be on multiple fires along the escarpment, starting with last summer, way down here, that's just off your map, the Loyalton incident, which had 3 fire tornadoes and burned multiple houses. During that incident, the fire established a fire tornado, and while we were out there doing structure protection, picked up multiple barns and sheds, threw them over top of the engines. Some of the rates of spread through that sagebrush were probably 7 to 8 miles an hour. Just extreme fire behavior. Most of them occur late afternoon, middle of the day to late afternoon, and even into the evening. Coming down here to the Beckworth complex earlier this summer, was fortunate or unfortunate enough to be there for multiple fire fronts coming off the escarpment. Same thing, multiple fire tornadoes, very extreme fire behavior. Sometimes you have zero warning, and then other times it'll sit and hang up on the escarpment for a day or two. It really just depends. But when everything lines up, it'll typically go from the top of the escarpment to the bottom, which is about 2 miles, in less than 10 to 15 minutes. As far as the tactics go for all of these, they're all fire front following. You pretty much have to try to sidestep out of the way, and as soon as it goes through, try to get back in and pick up the pieces and pick up the houses. The TRAs and safety zones are really the only thing you have to go to. You need them 3 times bigger than our typical TRAs, just because of the 60 to 200 foot flame links that come off of all the sagebrush and trees. Where it comes down here into the Dixie fire, where it came off more into the timber model, the rates of spread are a little bit slower, but much more spotting potential with obviously greater flame links. So just the fire history along 395 is very dangerous. It's definitely something you have to be heads up to, and it's not predictable. It's very unpredictable. It's never consistent. It's never 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's whenever it decides to come off, it's going to come off. It could be 8 at night or 2 in the morning. So anyway, that's all I got. Have a great day.
So my name is Adam Mattis. I'm a division chief here in Last and Modoc Unit. Been in the unit since 1997, and I've been involved with most every one of these fires that we've talked about and you've heard about in the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes here. So my portion of this is to tell you about what sort of tactics we should use. And when you're driving out here, you'll see what's going on, because you can see this from anywhere in the valley, what happens during these fires. So if you see this behavior occurring as you're coming out, what you're going to have to do is get yourself, have an escape route, have a temporary refuge area in your mind, and that might be just backing up off the highway, letting it come through, stepping back for a second, watch what it's doing, and then re-engaging. Sometimes we forget that critical portion of the re-engagement part of this. So that's what's going to get us, and it's going to help protect our critical structures and that site. So this year alone, I was on the Beckworth incident when it came down and through. The highway just doesn't even stop it. You would think it would, but it comes right straight across the highway. In the past 5 or 6 years, as I've been in, usually it's about a 40-minute drive from where I respond from to Highway 395 in the Doyle area, and the fire typically has already passed, and it's 10 to 15,000 acres on the other side in that short amount of time. So these fires will move fast. And as they go by, we need to re-engage, get back in, and protect the structures that we're sent here to protect.
Hi, my name is Magnus Johnson, Incident Management Team 1, Night Operations, here to discuss the erratic fire behavior that can occur along the Highway 395 corridor in the Honey Lake area. Currently, our fire has transitioned down part of the escarpment, but it hasn't been placed under the influence of the erratic winds that can come down due to the thermal low that can develop over the Honey Lake itself due to being exposed by the sun, and then the gradient winds or the typical southwesterly winds that flow across the top of the escarpment just above Highway 395 and again the Honey Lake area. Historically, last year and then all the way back to 1989 and probably before that, it occurs and can cause erratic fire behavior. The Honey Lake area becomes a heat sink. The hot air or the winds aloft will then drop down the escarpment, and due to the confluence of the topography and all the ground in there, and then the heat being drawn to that area right there, it causes erratic fire behavior. This is a hand drawing of the Eagle Fire in 1989. This gives you the topography adjacent to Highway 395, which is right here. This is Honey Lake as depicted out there. There's a multitude of topographical features or depressions or canyons or draws that come right down, which can influence wind as well as fire. In 1989, when this occurred, the burnover on the Eagle Fire, I happened to be at the upper end in what they called Honey Estates, and we'd got called that they were getting spots over the 395 adjacent to Honey Lake. Resources had went into there and were picking up the spots, and it was about, well, the timing, you'd have to look to the report, but typically we were told by the locals coming in that between 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you would have a heavy, heavy downflow of winds out towards the Honey Lake during this time of the year. So this is the raw footage from the media who were just south of where the incident occurred. As you see the Firenado coming in to the into the screen here, there is one engine in the back from the, at that time it was referred to as Nevada Yuba Placer unit. They were down over on the east side picking up spots when the erratic winds, when the winds aloft surfaced and came down. This is my strike team coming out. We'd attempted to stop in there and assist them, but we got another push by fire and we moved off to the side. The battalion chief, Bob Becker, stayed right back there. We all parked, ran back to assist to get the injured firefighters out. They attempted to, Dwayne Wright and the other firefighter attempted to deploy their shelters. Dwayne Wright's fire shelter was ripped from his hand with the winds. The other firefighter's bag that contained the shelter melted to his gloves, so he was unsuccessful. They were both picked up and blown by the wind. There was a third firefighter that was in there that saw it coming and actually jumped over the fence, got onto the old 395 and deployed his shelter at that location. And then once the fire subsided or he felt it was safe, then he returned back up and advised his company officer who he was.
Good morning. My name is Joe Walton, Battalion Chief, Lassa Modoc Unit, in the training battalion. Been assigned to the Dixie incident for multiple weeks. On the day of August 16th, I was assigned down in the 395 corridor. We got a reported spot on the east zone, approximately 1,600 hours, over in the Cradle Valley area. When we responded, it was reported to be a couple acres. When we got to the top of the escarpment, it was approximately 25 to 50 acres with a rapid rate of spread. We went in and tried to find access to the fire, trying to find a good safe anchor point, but it had erratic winds from the southwest, and it grew. By the time we were there, approximately 30 minutes, it was already 100 acres. It was on top of the escarpment and got very well established, pushing down towards the 395 corridor. We had approximately 20-mile-an-hour southwest winds, red flag warnings. The spot was produced somewhere from the Antelope Lake area. Once we got up here and saw where the spot was heading, it was pushing towards Janesville Grade Road. We tried to, again, find an anchor point, and by the time we started moving resources there, it already got established over the Janesville Grade Road and started pushing down into 395. We had erratic winds lining up with the drainages throughout the incident, even till approximately midnight, pushing through the houses. Multiple spots up in the timber. The upper escarpment's all timber. The lower, as you get down lower towards 395, you have bitter brush and mixed vegetation down there. It had such erratic winds lined up with the drainage, we couldn't get in front of it. Massive fire, trying to get established and do structure defense with engines down on the bottom. There was nothing we could do to stop the forward progress until it hit 395 down to the Honey Lake Valley. Then we could get established and start trying to anchor off 395 and kind of piece it together. As all the spots got established over 395, they were making their own head runs down to the Honey Lake Valley, so it was hard to safely engage in some places. We were on that, like I said, we probably fought fire in that corridor for 2 days straight, where it kind of did the same thing to us every day. With our history with the fire history in this area, about 1,400 hours, we started getting those southwest winds, and we had those, but they definitely continued late in the night, which was uncommon for us. Usually, about 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock, sometimes the winds die down, but we had substantial winds, but we had a red flag warning down in that area.
So you've heard from many speakers today about the effects of the weather on Highway 395 and what it does with the fire behavior. The thing to remember is there's some key points in there. If there's clearing over Honey Lake, that's a key point to recognize when there's fire up on the hillside, but there's also some different variations. If you have shading there, it may delay the time it comes down, but it still has the potential to come down in a very erratic fashion. Also with extreme cumulus, pyro-Q, if that's building up over a fire, that's indication looking for a column collapse that may help aid that. The big issue is when you have shading, it may delay that fact until you start getting that downwinds that spurs it off the ridge, or cumulus that starts to collapse slightly, that spurs it off. So just be careful to observe your fire behavior, observe your weather throughout the day when you're working in that area.